Mario Galaxy 2 is the only direct sequel in the 27-year history of 3D Mario games. For this reason, it's somewhat evaded the standard assessments that customarily greet those other titles. Each title has typically innovated on and departed from the last. Mario Galaxy 2, instead, sought to perfect or crystallize the insights of Mario Galaxy, streamlining Galaxy navigation into a linear course tree, integrating Luigi throughout courses rather than keeping him cordoned off until the post-game, placing transformable Lumas in-level rather than in the hub world itself, adjusting the meteor system so it's earned through medal accumulation rather than guided seemingly by randomness, and, most important of all, adding Yoshi. There are differences, certainly, but only in degree of quality, not in the kind of quality. Still Wii controls, still the spin move, the star bits, Peach and Rosalina, Bowser, gravity-based platforming on and around planetoids. Mario Galaxy 2, when discussed, is considered a sort of New Game Plus for Mario Galaxy, not least because the story here is so much thinner, seemingly, than the story of Mario Galaxy. There's a lot of discussion about how Miyamoto supposedly detested the storybook sections of Mario Galaxy, reputedly snuck in by Koizumi, and Miyamoto then tightened the reins with Galaxy 2, permitting, seemingly, not even a bit of story. Now, Nintendo's relationship to story is a much debated topic, and I really enjoyed Arlo's relatively recent video about it, which should be in the description. And one of my favorite, relatively newer channels, Lizardy, is working on a series about the Mario mandates, which is great. I can't recommend their stuff highly enough. A link to that should be in the description too. Broadly, the Mario mandates refer to the notion that Nintendo, after a certain point, severely limited the amount of narrative experimentation or brand alteration permitted in any Mario game. In other words, no actually interesting stories. I don't want to assume where Lizardy will go with their series, but I think it's fair to suggest that, for many people, Mario Galaxy 2 stands as a work representative of Nintendo's most conservative impulses, giving people a tweaked version of what you just gave them, repeating perfection in a platformer that's arguably just slightly more technically perfect, but not rocking the boat or doing something radically new, placating the people, lulling them, telling them what they want to hear. I'd like to briefly look at Mario Galaxy 2 from a story point of view, see what sort of narrative it was able to smuggle in, and try to consider the possibility that, in its way, Mario Galaxy 2 has as much story as Mario Galaxy 1. In fact, I'd like to suggest that Mario Galaxy 2 is not only the lone direct sequel among the 3D Marios, but that it is the lone meta Mario, taking place not only after Mario Galaxy, but actually within it. The storybook in Mario Galaxy is the source of the most emotionally involving, which is to say the best, story in the 3D Mario games. Rosalina reads the Lumas, who address her as their mother, the story of a girl who looks a lot like Rosalina, who helps a Luma find its mother, while secretly hoping to find her own. At a certain point, though, the princess breaks down, realizing that her mother isn't up here, but down there, sleeping under the tree. Not elsewhere, but gone. Mourning her mother, the princess finds consolation in her children, the Lumas, and accepts her identity as their mother, becoming for them the very figure she needed herself. The story is lovely and wise, suggesting that the only possible reconciliation with the past is found in accepting our present and moving into the future. You can't reiterate, but you can rhyme, and give to others the exact thing you feel has been taken from you. In other words, you can't reverse loss, but you can perpetuate that lost thing's legacy, take on the passed down role, and renew. Enter Mario Galaxy 2, which does include Rosalina until the very end, or a reading room until the secret end, but which opens and closes with the action explicitly taking place within the storybook pages themselves. We're to understand that Mario Galaxy 2 is another story told to the Lumas by Rosalina, and we're to understand Rosalina to be the figure who says the first line of the game. Unattributed, and set against the backdrop of a blank white screen. Now, let me tell you a new story that also begins with Stardust. Explicitly, this is a story meant to give us, and the implied audience of listening Lumas, the pleasure of repetition, Not a sequel that perpetuates the story, but an imagined repeat, less like the next episode of a drama, and more like another episode of a sitcom or another version of a dream. In fact, in its misty, sort of the same but sort of different way, the purposefully imperfect copy that is Mario Galaxy 2 almost seems made for those who'd been playing a slightly better version of Mario Galaxy in their imaginations ever since that first one came out. Mario Galaxy 2 is, in other words, the game version of replaying a slightly misremembered, slightly more perfect version of a game in your head as you await its sequel. Nintendo gave us exactly what we wanted. Comforting, only as unexpected as we could have expected, they told us our favorite bedtime story all over again. So the perfecting rather than innovative impulse in Mario Galaxy 2 is explained by reference to its frame, as a bedtime story for the loyal Lumas who loved Mario and miss him now that he's gone, following the conclusion of the first game. The logic of reunion also guides the evolution of the hub world in Mario Galaxy 2, just as the logic of exploration guided the evolution of the hub world in Mario Galaxy. In Mario Galaxy, you're literally exploring space, illuminating hitherto darkened corners of the universe. As you start to explore further galaxies, the lights of different parts of the hub world literally turn back on. You gain access to the tower, kitchen, bedroom, engine room. You explore, out there and at home. In Mario Galaxy 2, however, the hub world essentially stays the same. It's a big version of your head, and no matter how many galaxies you explore, you always enter them from the same place, the wheel of the ship. What does change are the companions who come aboard. When you explore galaxies in Mario Galaxy 2, you don't leave newly made friends behind. You bring them with you. By the end of the game, you'll have Luba, Yoshi, the Toad Brigade, Star Bunnies, Penguin, Whittle, Bob-omb Buddy, Guillermo's, Jibberjay, and once you get 242 stars, Rosalina herself aboard with you, cheering you on. Again, the logic of Mario Galaxy 2 is one of reunion, retention. Nobody's left behind. You can take everything and everyone with you. Something Luma's missing Mario might well want to hear. Something players missing Mario Galaxy may well want to hear too. And the ending brings only pleasure rather than bittersweetness. Whereas our devoted Luma sacrificed himself at the conclusion of Mario Galaxy, transforming through that sacrifice, in other words, symbolically maturing, in Mario Galaxy 2, our Luma simply gets to go home to his mother, a definitively more comforting story for an audience that could relate to it. The Lumas have gone on an imaginary journey, and at the story's conclusion are returned back to Rosalina's ship, returned to find themselves sitting, listening to her read to them, there in the reading room, and we, the player, have now been able to savor the sensation of return too, reunited with our first experience of playing the revolutionary Mario Galaxy. Mario Galaxy 2 may seem to have a simple story, but in fact it's telling two. One, the surface story being told to the Lumas, and in which we as Mario act as a star, story meant purely to comfort. And then there's the second story by which the first is deepened and complexified. This second story is the meta story. It's a richer story about what we, as players or as people who take in any kind of narrative, look for in stories in the first place. The pleasures of adventure combined with the comforts of home, the stimulation of variation combined with the familiarity of repetition, and the joy of return and retention. The fantasy that we can return to the same place and make it anew in our pleasure, again and again.